Welcome to another spine-chilling episode of Serial Killer Files by Skoob. I'm your host, Arthur Morgan, and today we're diving deep into one of the most terrifying serial killer cases of the Victorian era. A story that bridges three countries and reveals how a man sworn to heal instead chose to kill. Picture this: London, 1891. The gaslit streets of Lambeth echo with the screams of a young woman writhing in agony. 19-year-old Ellen Donworth convulses violently on the cobblestones, describing her attacker as a tall, dark, cross-eyed man who gave her something to drink. Within hours, she's dead, the first known victim of a killer who would terrorize London's most vulnerable women. But here's what makes this case truly chilling. The man responsible wasn't some back-alley thug or deranged vagrant. He was Dr. Thomas Neill Cream, a respected physician who used his medical knowledge not to save lives, but to end them in the most agonizing way possible. This is the story of Canada's Jack the Ripper, the Lambeth Poisoner, and one of history's most calculating serial killers. Thomas Neill Cream's journey from healer to killer began in Glasgow, Scotland, where he was born before his family relocated to Quebec City in 1854. On the surface, his early life appeared unremarkable, the son of a family seeking better opportunities in the New World. But beneath this veneer of respectability, something dark was already stirring. Cream excelled academically, attending La Chute Academy before enrolling at McGill University in Montreal. Here's where the story takes its first sinister turn. His medical thesis focused on chloroform, a substance that would later become central to his first suspected murder. In 1876, he graduated with his medical degree, but his education was far from over. His postgraduate training at St. Thomas Hospital Medical School in London exposed him to the most advanced medical knowledge of the time. By 1878, he had obtained additional qualifications as a physician and surgeon in Edinburgh. Armed with this extensive medical training, Cream returned to North America, but he carried with him knowledge that would prove deadly. The first glimpse of his true nature emerged during his time in Waterloo, Quebec. Here, Cream met Flora Brooks, a young woman who would become his first victim in all but name. Their courtship seemed normal enough until Brooks became pregnant. Cream's response revealed the cold calculation that would define his later crimes. Rather than embrace responsibility, Cream attempted to perform an abortion on Brooks and failed catastrophically, leaving her severely ill. When he tried to flee to Montreal, her father forced him to return and marry her. But marriage meant nothing to Cream. The day after their wedding, he abandoned his bride and left for England, never to return. Flora Brooks would die of consumption in 1877, weakened perhaps by Cream's botched procedure. This pattern, the exploitation of vulnerable women, the callous abandonment, the lack of empathy, would define Cream's entire criminal career. When Cream returned to North America in 1878, he established a medical practice in London, Ontario. Despite being charged with practicing without a license under Ontario's Medical Act, a charge to which he pled guilty, patients continued to visit his office. This early brush with the law should have been a warning, but Cream's charm and medical credentials provided him with a veneer of respectability that masked his true intentions. In 1879, the first murder directly attributed to Cream occurred. Catherine Hutchinson Gardner was found dead in a privy behind his office at 204 Dundas Street. She was pregnant and had been murdered with a handkerchief soaked in chloroform, the very substance Cream had studied so extensively during his medical training. The circumstances surrounding Gardner's death reveal Cream's manipulative nature. When she sought his help for an abortion, he refused. Instead, he pressured her to falsely accuse a local businessman of being the father of her child. When Gardner allegedly threatened suicide after Cream refused to help her, he claimed she had written him a letter naming the businessman as the father. but Gardner's family and roommates immediately recognized the deception. The handwriting didn't match hers, and the signature was clearly forged. Despite overwhelming evidence pointing to Cream, authorities took no action. The case was never solved, allowing Cream to escape justice and setting the stage for even more horrific crimes to come. Cream then moved to Chicago, where he established a practice near the red light district, offering illegal abortions to prostitutes. This location was no accident. It provided him with a steady stream of vulnerable victims who were unlikely to be missed or whose deaths would be inadequately investigated. In August 1880, Mary Ann Faulkner died after an alleged operation by Cream, but he escaped prosecution due to lack of evidence. In December of that same year, another patient, Miss Stack, died following treatment. Cream's response to this death was particularly telling. He attempted to blackmail the pharmacist who had filled his prescription, showing his willingness to exploit tragedy for personal gain. But it was in April 1881 that Cream's true method of operation became clear. Alice Montgomery died of strychnine poisoning following an abortion in a rooming house just a block from Cream's office. The case was ruled a murder, but never solved. However, the location, timing, and method, particularly the use of strychnine, make Cream the most likely suspect. By 1891, Cream had arrived in London under the alias Dr. Thomas Neill, and the city's most vulnerable women were about to face a terror unlike anything they had experienced. Operating in the impoverished areas of South London, particularly near Lambeth and the East End, Cream had found his hunting ground among sex workers, women whom society overlooked and whose deaths were often inadequately investigated. October 1891 marked the beginning of Cream's documented killing spree in London with the murder of Ellen Donworth, that 19-year-old sex worker I mentioned at the beginning. The details of her death reveal the calculated cruelty that defined Cream's crimes. Ellen was last seen walking with a well-dressed man in a top hat, an image that would become Cream's calling card. Despite seeking medical help after consuming whatever Cream had given her, she died in excruciating agony from strychnine poisoning. Strychnine is not a merciful poison. It causes violent convulsions, muscle spasms, and eventually death from asphyxiation or cardiac arrest. Victims remain conscious throughout their ordeal, experiencing hours of unbearable pain before finally succumbing. Cream's choice of this particular poison reveals a sadistic streak. He wasn't just killing his victims, he was torturing them. 2 days after Ellen Donworth's death, Cream struck again. Matilda Clover, another sex worker, fell victim to his strychnine. However, her death was initially attributed to alcoholism, a misdiagnosis that allowed Cream to continue his spree without immediate suspicion. This misattribution wasn't uncommon. The symptoms of strychnine poisoning could mimic other conditions, and the deaths of sex workers weren't always thoroughly investigated. For several months, Cream laid low, but in April 1892, he escalated his crimes dramatically by killing 2 women in a single act. Alice Marsh and Emma Shrevell were both sex workers whom Cream had accompanied home. Both died from strychnine poisoning, suffering the same violent spasms and convulsions that had characterized his previous murders. Autopsies confirmed lethal doses of strychnine in their stomachs, establishing a clear pattern in Cream's methodology. But not every encounter ended in death. Lou Harvey, a sex worker from Piccadilly, narrowly escaped becoming another victim through a combination of intuition and luck. After agreeing to meet Cream for dinner and a theater visit, she was given pills by him, supposedly to improve her pale complexion caused by London's polluted air. Something about Cream's behavior made Harvey suspicious, and she wisely discarded the pills into the River Thames. Her survival would later prove crucial to Cream's conviction. What ultimately led to Cream's capture wasn't brilliant detective work or forensic breakthroughs. It was his own compulsive need to control the narrative around his crimes. Operating under his alias in London, Cream couldn't resist inserting himself into the investigations of the very murders he had committed. His pattern of deception began almost immediately after Ellen Donworth's death. Cream sent anonymous letters to authorities accusing Frederick Smith, a respected member of the W.H. Smith publishing family, of her murder. There was no connection between Smith and Donworth. It was a completely fabricated accusation designed to deflect suspicion from himself. During a brief trip to Canada, Cream escalated his manipulation by placing a notice at London's prestigious Metropole Hotel, claiming that the murderer behind the recent poisonings worked within the hotel itself. This wasn't just misdirection. It was psychological terrorism, designed to spread fear and confusion throughout the city. But Cream's most dangerous game involved the murders of Alice Marsh and Emma Shrivel. 4 weeks after their deaths, he sent typed letters signed William H. Murray to Deputy Coroner George Percival, accusing Dr. Walter Harper of St. Thomas's Hospital of the poisonings. Simultaneously, he sent extortion letters to Dr. Harper's father, demanding money in exchange for silence. This dual strategy of false accusation and blackmail showed Cream's increasing boldness and recklessness. The breakthrough came when police connected these letters to earlier correspondence about Matilda Clover's death. Letters signed M. Malone had been demanding money in return for silence about what the writer claimed was her poisoning. These messages contained details that had never been released to the public, forcing investigators to re-examine what had been ruled a natural death. Handwriting analysis revealed that the various letters, signed William H. Murray, A. O'Brien, and M. Malone, had all been written by the same person. This discovery transformed the investigation, suggesting that the writer was either directly involved in the murders or had intimate knowledge of them. Cream's downfall accelerated when he began socializing around London, inserting himself into conversations about the very murders he had committed. This wasn't the behavior of a man trying to avoid suspicion. It was the arrogance of someone who believed he was too clever to be caught. His fatal mistake came during a casual encounter with John Haynes, a retired New York detective. As they discussed the Lambeth Poisoner case, Cream revealed astonishingly detailed information about victims like Matilda Clover and Louise Harvey, details that had never been made public. When Haynes asked how he knew these specifics, Cream casually claimed he had read about them in the British Medical Journal. Haynes wasn't convinced, but rather than confront Cream directly, he reported the suspicious interaction to Scotland Yard. This tip, combined with the mounting evidence from the anonymous letters, prompted a deeper investigation into Cream's background. The truth was explosive. Dr. Thomas Neill was actually Dr. Thomas Neill Cream, a physician with a criminal record in both the United States and Canada. He had been convicted of murder in Illinois and had only recently been released from Joliet Prison under questionable circumstances involving political bribery arranged by his wealthy brother. With this information, police began surveillance of Cream. His response was telling. Rather than maintain a low profile, he contacted police through a solicitor and demanded they stop following him. This confirmed he had something to hide. During a subsequent interview with detectives, he was found carrying strychnine-labeled bottles and a medical bag filled with pills. This pattern of trying to frame others for his crimes wasn't new for Cream. Years earlier in Chicago, he had murdered Daniel Stott, the husband of a woman he was having an affair with. Stott had been taking medication for epilepsy, which Cream laced with strychnine. When Stott died, Cream tried to frame the pharmacist who had filled the prescription by writing to the coroner. But the pharmacist's detailed records exposed Cream's deception, leading to his conviction and imprisonment. By June 1892, police had assembled enough evidence to arrest Cream. The case against him was compelling. The anonymous letters, the incriminating conversations with Haynes, the contents of his medical bag, and handwriting analysis all pointed to his guilt. He was charged with the murders of Matilda Clover, Ellen Donworth, Alice Marsh, and Emma Shrivel, along with the attempted murder of Louise Harvey and several counts of blackmail. Cream's trial at the Old Bailey was a sensation. The courtroom was packed with spectators eager to see the man who had terrorized Lambeth brought to justice. Newspapers reported every detail of the proceedings, captivated by the story of a doctor who had perverted his oath to do no harm. The prosecution presented a methodical case, detailing how Cream had used his medical knowledge to procure and administer poisons. Witnesses testified about his suspicious behavior, and forensic evidence linked him to several deaths. Most damning were Cream's own letters, in which he had boasted about his crimes while attempting to frame innocent men. Throughout the trial, Cream maintained an air of arrogant indifference. He seemed almost bored by the proceedings, confident that he could outsmart both prosecution and jury. But as witness after witness testified and evidence mounted, his composure began to crack. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. On October 15, 1892, Dr. Thomas Neill Cream was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. The judge remarked on the cold-blooded nature of his crimes and the calculated manner in which he had carried them out. Even then, Cream showed no emotion, maintaining his facade of superiority to the very end. On November 15, 1892, Cream was hanged at Newgate Prison. According to some reports, his last words were a chilling and incomplete confession. "I am Jack the..." before he was silenced by the hangman's rope. This statement, likely a final attempt to secure his place in criminal infamy, would fuel decades of speculation about a possible connection to the Jack the Ripper murders. The question of whether Thomas Neill Cream could have been Jack the Ripper has fascinated true crime enthusiasts for over a century. Both operated in London's impoverished districts, both targeted prostitutes, and Cream's supposed deathbed confession has kept the theory alive. But does the evidence support this connection? Jack the Ripper's canonical murders occurred in autumn 1888 in Whitechapel, with 5 victims brutally killed and mutilated. The Ripper's crimes were notable for extreme violence, deep throat slashes, and abdominal mutilations that suggested possible surgical knowledge. The killer was never caught, leaving one of history's greatest criminal mysteries. Cream, meanwhile, was imprisoned at Joliet State Penitentiary in Illinois from 1881 to 1891, a sentence that covers the entire period of the Ripper murders in 1888. This provides him with a verifiable alibi that should definitively exclude him as a suspect. However, conspiracy theories persist. Some suggest Cream escaped custody or bribed officials to have a look-alike serve his sentence while he traveled to London. Proponents cite his medical background, his later crimes targeting prostitutes, and his apparent deathbed confession as circumstantial evidence. But this theory crumbles under scrutiny. Joliet Prison maintained strict security, and records show no indication of escape or substitution. Medical records and staff accounts confirm Cream's continuous presence throughout the relevant period. Moreover, the killer's methods were completely different. The Ripper used knives for brutal, close-contact violence, while Cream was a poisoner who preferred the slow torture of strychnine. The geographic focus also differed significantly. Ripper murders concentrated in Whitechapel, while Cream's victims were found in Lambeth, several miles away, with different social dynamics. The idea that these were the same killer doesn't align with the evidence. The persistent fascination with linking Cream to Jack the Ripper reveals more about our desire to solve historical mysteries than it does about actual criminal connections. Sometimes, the truth is less sensational, but more revealing. Cream was his own kind of monster, and that was terrifying enough. The story of Thomas Neill Cream is more than just a tale of one man's descent into murderous madness. It's a window into the vulnerabilities of Victorian society and the dangers of unchecked authority. Cream's ability to operate across 3 countries, exploiting women seeking medical help, reveals systemic failures that extended far beyond one individual's criminal behavior. Cream's victims were primarily women on society's margins, sex workers, women seeking illegal abortions, and others whom society often overlooked. His choice of targets wasn't random. It was calculated. These women were less likely to be missed, their deaths less likely to be thoroughly investigated, and their testimonies less likely to be believed if they survived to report him. The poison he chose, strychnine, reveals the sadistic nature of his crimes. Unlike quick-acting toxins that might be considered merciful, strychnine causes hours of agony. Victims experience violent convulsions while remaining fully conscious, aware of their approaching death, but powerless to prevent it. Cream's medical knowledge made him fully aware of what his victims would experience, yet he chose this method repeatedly. His crimes also highlighted the limitations of forensic science in the late 19th century. Strychnine poisoning was often misdiagnosed, particularly when the victims were from marginalized populations. The connection between multiple deaths might never have been established without Cream's own compulsive need to insert himself into the investigations. Perhaps most chillingly, Cream's case demonstrates how professional credentials can provide cover for the worst kinds of predators. His medical degree gave him access to poisons, knowledge of their effects, and the trust of vulnerable women seeking help. He perverted every aspect of his medical training, using healing knowledge as a weapon and exploiting the doctor-patient relationship for murderous ends. The rapid industrialization and urbanization of the Victorian era created perfect hunting grounds for predators like Cream. Large cities provided anonymity, while vast disparities between rich and poor created populations of vulnerable individuals. The lack of comprehensive medical care for the poor meant that illegal practitioners could operate with minimal oversight. As we close the chapter on Dr. Thomas Neill Cream, we're left confronting a chilling truth. A trusted physician used knowledge meant to heal as a weapon, leaving victims across 3 countries and exposing how easily authority can be abused. His downfall came not from brilliant policing, but from arrogance, letters, loose talk, and a need for control that revealed more than he intended. His case reshaped conversations around oversight, forensics, and protecting the vulnerable, reminding us that danger can wear a respectable face. But there's more to uncover about the motives, missteps, and hidden details behind his crimes. Curious what was missed and what still unsettles investigators today. Download the Skoob app now to get access to the full story and dive deeper into the darkness history tried to bury.